A rare Thursday edition of Coast to Coast. Guys, Andrew and Bobby here. Pre-game chat a little bit before tonight's game, but also we're going to quickly talk about some futures, some future bets for the Grey Cup champion, and some most outstanding player award futures as well. It's a good time to do that. And, well, Bobby, we think that maybe this weekend will impact those odds quite a bit. So that's why we wanted to jump ahead and do this show now.
Yeah, for sure. We're kind of at the midway point, and this is the first time in a while where you don't really have a clear front runner, despite what the odds are telling us. I don't think there's any clear M.O.P leader right now, and I think there's a few opportunities on the board, especially at some higher numbers.
And, right now, really, when you look at the Grey Cup odds, I understand Montreal's record. I understand how well they've played, but how many underdogs we see make the Grey Cup. Hey, Montreal did it themselves and have success. That's what's awesome about the CFL. I understand there's a lot fewer teams than the NFL, but it also means that, two teams meet in the Grey Cup, anything can happen. So when you look, I can think of countless underdogs over the last several years. So, looking at some of these teams, and you kind of ask yourself, you kind of want to take one long shot, right? But do you want to start in the Western Division?
Sure. For Grey Cup odds here.
Yeah. Or no, you want to start?
Okay. No, that's fine. I like the East is pretty straightforward. I think, right? Like Montreal, they're going to host the East final, so they're going to be, depending who they play, a field goal or a touchdown favorite, and they'll probably be a field goal favorite at most in the Grey Cup if they make it. So what do you have right now? Like around 210, 220. I think you're better just doing a money line parlay or taking the spread in the Grey Cup, and you're not tying up your money for that long, and you're able to kind of, I don't know, you're kind of sinking your money into this thing and hoping that everything goes your way, which it rarely ever does. So I don't really think there's much value there. And I think the worst value is, well, maybe let's not get into that yet, but the worst value in the East, I think, is Ottawa, just because even if they're hosting that East final, I still think Toronto is going to be favored. So I think they're going to be dogs the whole way, including a touchdown dog if they make it to Montreal and a field goal dog in the Grey Cup. So they're getting like 750, something like that. I think it should be closer to 1,000 or 1,500. So a lot of these could be, best way to attack that would just be take them game by game on a money line parlay.
Do you think a team like the Bombers that had kind of such an uncharacteristic start to their season is now flying under the radar at this point?
I thought they were. I looked at their odds, like they're about 600 right there with Saskatchewan. But that stupid tie of Saskatchewan, it's kind of made it impossible for the Bombers to pass them unless they win their back-to-back games coming up over Labor Day. So
yeah,
right now, like I think it looks huge, like 600. You haven't seen that on the Bombers in 5 years. But I think, like, when I kind of did the math on it, it kind of works out to where they should be.
Hell, maybe the Elks just keep winning. Maybe we we all pick the Elks and just become the biggest fans of Edmonton. We know they're in for probably a tough couple of weeks. We'll see what ends up happening with them. But that old saying, about defense winning championships, Montreal, I came into the year, and you'll remember this. I said, oh, that team, all they are is defense. I kind of made fun of Cody Fajardo, said that all they really were their defense. And now look at this Winnipeg team. They're not blowing teams out by any means. I said it on the show earlier in the week, which is why I like betting against them this week, is that they, unlike past years, they're not really in it to run the score up on teams. They're playing defense. They're running the ball. I don't know. I think that number is really nice there. And I'm honestly shocked by the numbers that I saw for Calgary. I know that sounds hilarious based on kind of how inconsistent they are, but it's not like the West is so stacked right now that it's a sure thing who makes it out of there. You know what I mean? Like I really look at this, especially with the drop off of BC's plays the last handful of weeks. I don't think we can really say anybody's dominating in the West at all.
Yeah, I don't know about Calgary, just because they still need so much more to make up here. They can split the next two against Edmonton. They've got two more against Saskatchewan they can split. But I don't see them getting past like 8 wins. You'd need a pretty bad collapse for the Lions at least to jump them. And there's no crossover here. Like Ottawa just needs to win a couple more games. Toronto needs to win 3, and they're playing Hamilton a ton, both teams, right? So I don't think there's going to be a crossover there. That number is pretty huge at 40-1, but I don't really like it. I think BC's number is the most ridiculous on there. I think they're second favorite right now, and I don't even think they're favored to win the division. They got a pretty tough schedule. It might come down to the final game of the season, but even then, like they're paying what, 230 on the odds here. I think whoever comes out of the West, it's not really going to matter. All these games are going to be within a field goal, like the line on at least the semifinal, final, and even the Grey Cup. So there's plenty of opportunities to just money line parlay that. The only one that looks okay right now is the Riders, in my opinion. They're 600 on FanDuel at least. And if they win the division, which I think they will, they'll probably be close to about 250, 300 by the time the playoffs start. So I think that 600 is kind of glaring there. I don't think the books are accounting for this stupid tie they had. And as long as they don't lose back-to-back to the Bombers and do their traditional September, October collapse like they've been doing the last few years, then I think that's probably the best value in terms of Grey Cup. And that's why we wanted to have this on right now, because if they beat Toronto tonight, I think a lot will have to go wrong for them to not be the 1 seed in the West.
Yeah, and things can make a big difference after just one game. I'm with you on them. And also, Bobby, they haven't really shown us their best, have they? Like, that's what I think, it's almost like kind of right now when I'm trying to find ways to show respect to a team like BC, it's like, well, you know what? It's better to face adversity now than later on, And so I think Saskatchewan hasn't really even been the best version of themselves. They've had injuries. Patterson was okay, but they've had injuries at the defensive position. Even if AJ Ouellette's not having his best year, he still has been injured as well. And then, of course, Trevor Harris. So, yeah, I think what's cool about futures like this is that you're dealing with a team that the bookmakers haven't even seen the real team. I don't think that they're capable of. And let's be honest, coaching, PI, missed kicks, whatever it might be, they were right there last week in winning that game. So that's it for me. I really think if you're gonna do it, like people always say, like there's value in futures at whatever number, as long as you're beating the number and whatever. But to me, in the CFL, because of how often we see upsets, I prefer to take teams at a decent number. And like you explained, if I'm going to take one of the favorites, I'm going to just find ways to bet on them. That's kind of how I feel. Like I'm not going to tie up a plus 200 CFL future when the underdog wins outright, like 2 of the last 4 years. It's just not worth it to me. But in the East, you mentioned Ottawa. Do you think it's competitive right now, this East?
I think the record's making it competitive. But like I said, even if they're hosting Toronto in that East semifinal, I'll be on the Argos if they're not favored, right? So, and if Ottawa goes to Montreal, what's that line? That line's going to be close to a touchdown. So yeah. I don't really give them much hope. I'm surprised they're lined where they are. I think Toronto's got a much better shot now with Chad Kelly coming back, and the Red Blacks have kind of stumbled their way through, right? They won 2 games just because the kickoffs went out of bounds.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I felt about the Red Blacks, and I think there were points in the year where you felt the same way when you came on sarcastically wearing the jersey. I remember, and so this team's bothered me, but the fact is they have overachieved, but maybe that is just who they are. And so as much as every week I kind of come on the show that we do bashing them, when you look at some of the Grey Cup odds and the futures for them, like they honestly would be a team worth sprinkling on, even though they're a team that I've talked so poorly about, because I just feel like that number doesn't correlate the level of play they've been reaching. And other than that, yeah, I agree with you. I think I think it might be worth it just to bet Toronto, like you said, like down the road if you wanted them, because they're going to be a dog anyway in that opening game, especially, and then you could bet on them again in the Grey Cup. Uh, but there's not really much for me because right now we obviously Hamilton's out, right? And then you've got the top dog, and then the two teams in the middle, pretty much. So
Yeah,
it's
either
interesting to see.
way, Montreal is going to be a big favorite in that East final. So I think the only way to play those, either Toronto or Ottawa, is just a money line parlay, at least to get it to the Grey Cup, and then figure out what you want to do there if you want to hedge. But
Yeah,
I don't see much value on this, and like for me, it's just Saskatchewan. I think has got some value, but like you said, you're like these aren't the traditional bets that we should be making. Like I like to say, these are the bets that you make on the books where you get the bonuses, and you want to show that you like these long shots. You'll make these stupid bets just so you don't get banned after you win your first 4 or 5 on a Betway or a Tony bet.
yeah. You got to throw in a couple of these and so for the MOP, do you think that the MOP and from what you know about the award in the CFL, you have to have had your team have full success, or do you think that when we take a look at the MOP, there's some guys that you like that maybe haven't had full success for worth long shots?
Yeah, I think it's a lot different than the NFL, right? This is most outstanding. It's not most valuable, so it's not always a quarterback that's going to win it. I actually confirmed with some guys in the media. I was at Lions practice the other day just to ask this question. Like, so each team nominates one player for they nominate to their MOP, and that's like the 4, 5, 6 people that cover the team, maybe the head coach. And once we have every team with their player, each division nominates one. So it's one from the West and one from the East. And then there's about 60 guys that vote on it. All the media, national and the team by team, they get to vote. But the key with that is your most knowledgeable vote is the people that are covering the day to day of the teams. The
Right.
guys that know all the players, the guys that have seen every play. That's only the first level. Once you get to that third level where you have the league wide media voting, you've got the potential for people that don't even watch the games, and they exist.
Look at
So
stats.
yeah. So and there's another thing, like all they do is all they can really do here. Like the CFL is not an analytics driven league, despite what they want to tell you with Genius Sports. This is a vote that's going to be made based on stats and feelings, general feelings about what I don't know, whatever mood they're in that day. And the biggest issue, of course, is it's a vote. It's not easy to predict. You saw 6 months ago, I was right there with our pal GRP wins. When the NFL voted comeback player of the year, they voted a guy who came back from just being a bad quarterback instead of a guy who came back from the dead. So there's a lot to consider here. It's kind of a wacky bet. That's why I don't really want to like. Fajardo is the only guy who's a heavy favorite here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's the best way to be putting your money on something like this, right? There's plenty of these, like Vernon Adams was a heavy favorite a few weeks ago. Now look at him; he's up to 400 now. Hillary Clinton was a heavy favorite a few years ago, and look what happened to her. So I don't like Fajardo, but I think there's a few other options on the board here, and there's some surprisingly high numbers given how wide open I think this race is.
Looking at Fajardo, just as the season he's had and the like the completion percentage and how smooth all of his starts really looked. Obviously, the team's done really well. I'd go on out on a whim and just say that if you want him, you're probably going to get a better number in 5 weeks, I bet, than you see right now. And sometimes they get worse, and that could be a crazy statement, but I think they're going to face some adversity. They might, lose 1 or 2 games. Then all of a sudden, if he throws a few interceptions and at the same time, Bobby, I get it. You could look at this number and say it's only going to get worse, but I think that he would have to play mistake-free football for that number to change. Like, in a way, if we can get even plus 200 on that, but yeah, I like the VA one, and I think that it's more so for me thinking about Rourke coming back, playing well, getting the job done, but then VA getting the ball, and then when he gets the ball, if he does really well with it, they're not going to give it back to Rourke. So then it'll be an interesting decision to make in the offseason for the coaching staff, because everyone keeps saying they're not going to trade him. But I think that if he comes back and gets the ball and makes some noise with it, he might be the starter. They're not. What do you think about? They're not replacing him, I don't think.
Well, so even if Rourke plays the rest of the season, that's only 9 games. And 2 years ago, the season that everybody talks about, he threw for like 300 yards a game, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and he lost to Colaros. And the main argument was that he only played 10 games. So
Right.
fair enough, Colaros had a great year, but he played the whole year. So the fact that he didn't play 10 games works against him. Well, Rourke can only play 9 games here, and his first one wasn't very good. So I thought it was kind of a weird, like I kind of wrote VA off as well, but the more I think about it, VA's already had his 8 games or so. If
Right.
anything goes wrong, like he's getting the 9th, the 10th, 11th, the 12th, and he's not getting traded this year. BC is going for the Grey Cup. They're likely going to be in the playoffs, so he's the best insurance policy you could have. Um, like I don't know what he was a few weeks ago, but he was probably, I think he was the favorite over Fajardo. So
He was the chalk
uh,
most of the year, I think.
yeah, so I like they were talking about a 6,000 yard potential season, right? So I don't know if Hollins or McInnes can really, like, they've been pretty quiet this last month. If you're going to nominate a player on this team, if VA gets a couple more games in for any reason, whether it's Rourke not playing well, which I don't think that'll be, but if anything happens to Rourke, VA is coming right back in. And how could the team not nominate him as the M.O.P. given the first half of the season that he's had? So Rourke's never going to make that 9 game threshold, 10 game threshold, but in a weird way, the VA could. So I think at what is it, 390? I think on FanDuel. I think there is, I don't know. It's hard to it's kind of backwards thinking. Like you're taking the guy who's the backup quarterback
Yeah.
for most
Well, he's
outstanding player.
plus 550 at
Oh,
DraftKings.
that's even better.
At DraftKings, yeah. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I like it quite a bit, and I think that to your point, he could still win it without playing a bunch of games when he comes back. But I'd be curious to see. I've always heard like this just never worked for any football team to have multiple quarterbacks playing a game. There needs to be one guy. Well, I'd be curious to see what happens when they're both sharp and they're both healthy. Then there's going to be some decisions to make. But we talked about the Riders. Trevor Harris hasn't really had a lot of bad games yet, but he has gotten injured again. What do you think about him? I'm seeing at DraftKings, my numbers are 25-1.
Well, that's a bad number then. I think that there's 48 on FanDuel, 45 other places. There was a 50 today. And how do I know that? Because this is the one I think is the bet here. Right now, PFF has him as the second highest graded quarterback behind VA. And if he stays healthy, that's the thing. He's only played 3 or 4 games. If he stays healthy, he's leading Saskatchewan to like an 8-4 record in games that he's started, based on how the rest of the season looks. Right now, he's averaging about 300 yards, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions so far. And that's basically identical to Cody Fajardo. So I don't understand why you
Yeah.
have a guy. They're both first place teams, but you have Fajardo as a heavy favorite, and you have Trevor Harris, even at 25, I think is a ridiculous number. The only other person I think you can nominate off this team would be Milligan on defense, but again, you have to make it past that first level of the media, the guys that are watching every game. And there's kind of a national narrative about this defense, but if you're watching these games, like they were torched pretty bad against BC.
Yeah.
I don't think the secondary has really carried him. He's got 6 interceptions, which is impressive, but they're giving up the most big yard pass plays against. Well, if you're going to praise this defense, I think you're going to praise this banged up D line that leads the league in sacks. So
Right.
I think the defense has had its good spots. I don't think 6 interceptions, maybe if he gets to 10, even then, I don't think that's going to outshine Harris. And if you want to talk about a defense that carries a team, I think you'd say that's Montreal. They have the lowest yards per attempt against. So you can just compare Harris to Fajardo, and the more you talk yourself into Harris, the more you talk yourself out of Cody Fajardo, who himself is only going to have a 12-game season if he stays healthy, because Davis Alexander will probably get that week 21 or week 22, however many weeks there are. Alexander will get that mean nothing game at the end of the year. So
Yeah.
I think there's huge value on Harris, and like we're going to know in half an hour, I think, whether this is a good bet or not.
We're gonna find out, within a little while, whether or not this is good to punch in or if we made a mistake. But like I'll just say this because you touched on all the stuff I was really gonna say. I'll say this is that it's the same thing I mentioned with the future bet overall. But I think you look at Montreal with Fajardo, you look at Saskatchewan. Which team kind of has more of a bone to pick with the league as we approach the second half of the season? Final quarter of the season. Not Montreal. They've spanked a lot of teams. They've won at home. They've done well with backups, done well with this. I think Saskatchewan has more of a chip on their shoulder, and I think that we're going to see more kind of back and forth, high scoring, games. So, and like you said, it's not like this is a Trevor Harris that's really having a good season, but his team's in last place. This is a Trevor Harris on a team that's good and doing really well in the standings. So, but as you said, Bobby, we're either going to be feeling good or we're going to be feeling bad. They're like, oh man, I could have just made that next Monday and gotten even better odds. So we'll find out. But even if he performs well tonight and they lose, it's decent for us.
Yeah, and I just don't see it happening, right? Like, and so if he makes it through, he's going to be nominated up against like a VA or Zach Collaros is like fourth favorite, and he's like 5 TDs, 9 interceptions. So he's not going to clean this season up. Oliveira, there might be some value there. I don't know what number you have him at. I got him at around 60-1. He's putting up similar numbers to the year before, but he doesn't have any touchdowns. He's banged up the first few weeks of the year. Who else? Like Trey Ford might be the nominee of the Elks, but then there's a guy who's played 8 games all year. Calgary, half the time, even half. It's not even week to week with Jake Maier. It's quarter to quarter. One quarter they want him benched. The next he's the best. They're so happy they got rid of Bo Levi, right? So
that's Jake Maier in a nutshell. You just described what he is. That's what he is.
I just don't know if he's going to be an M.O.P. Maybe who are they nominating on that team, right? So there's nobody that really stands out. That's why I like Harris, at least in the West. And then who's he going to go up against? If it's Fajardo, I think his odds are like 100 times worse than Fajardo's, and I think it's a 50-50 vote.
And I think again, I think there's a lot more room for Harris to kind of make his case. I almost feel like Fajardo's almost made his case that he's played his best football, I think, of the season. But that'll do it, guys. Enjoy the game tonight. Hope you guys watched our actual show breaking down all the games this week. But best of luck, and we'll see you next time.